Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
We are Shelly and Krista, and we're very excited to be part of your learning for the next 4 days at the first annual Simply Coaching Summit.
Yes, we're so honored to have been invited to be a part of this and be among so many incredible presenters this week. And so happy that you've chosen to spend some time this summer learning about coaching.
So we'd like to tell you a little bit about us. We're both literacy coaches in upstate New York. We are in different districts, and we also have come together and have started our own consulting business.
Yes.
So in my district, I work mostly with administrators, teachers, and students in K through 8 for the last 5 years. And previous to this, I was a first grade teacher, a second grade teacher, reading teacher, and I also work with pre-service teachers in literacy at the University of Albany.
So I'm Krista Senator, and I'm also a literacy coach. I work all the way from K to 12. So high school's been a new world for me, but it's been a lot of fun this year. So K-12 literacy coach. Prior to that, I was a fifth grade teacher. I've got my start in the Bronx, New York, at a wonderful school there. And then when I relocated, found a job up here as a reading teacher. And after a number of years, became a literacy coach in my district. So LitCoach Connection was born about a year ago. Shelly and I met at a literacy coaching collaborative in this area, and it's a group that meets about once a month, different literacy coaches from the area, which has been just so critical because if you're a literacy coach, you may be the only one in your building, you may be the only one in your district, and it can be a lonely job. And so having opportunities like this summit to come together and learn from each other is just so critical. So we met through this group and discovered pretty quickly that we had very similar vision for the job and for the work that we do, which is really to empower teachers. So we got together, decided to start our company, and it's just been an amazing ride so far. In addition to consulting, we also present at quite a few national and local conferences. So that's another great way that we're able to connect with other coaches and educators.
And, through all of these opportunities, we've really been able to broaden our network of coaches and learn from so many amazing coaches along the way. So, make sure you're taking down people's emails and getting their Twitter handles while you're here, because you will be able to reach out to those folks and hopefully connect with us also during this time and after. At the bottom, you will notice it says link to the resources. You won't really be able to click on that, but you'll go down into the notes, and the notes will show you how to get to our page with all the resources that we're going to be talking about today.
So when we think about coaching writing teachers, our intention is really to empower teachers to embrace responsive writing instruction in order to grow purposeful, joyful, and skilled student writers. So we really feel that when we coach teachers to be responsive to student needs, responsive to student skills and abilities and interests and their identity, that fuels a real love of writing and motivation to write. And so our work today, what we're going to share with you in this next hour, are some different approaches that we have, that we've tried, we find tried and true, to help writing teachers be really responsive to their students.
And how that you can work with them to support them along the way at different stages in their development.
So we wanted to start with a spark. This is our good friend, Paula Burke. She is a literacy coach in Augusta, Maine, and she has just published her second book. It's called Spark, Quick Writes to Kindle Elementary, or Hearts and Minds in Elementary Classrooms. I have it right here. You see the camera. And so when you're thinking about writing instruction, some of us use units of study, some of us use a writing workshop format, not everyone, where either way, you're studying and immersing students in one genre at a time. And so I love this idea of sparks because they're quick. They're all about just volume and getting kids to write regularly and maybe you're in a nonfiction unit, but you could do a spark on a narrative, like look at a photograph and write off that. And so I love how it really encourages students to be really fluid in their genre knowledge and writing. So we'll let Paula explain the rest better than I can.
And you'll see how that there are opportunities as a coach and to use them for your professional development meetings, or maybe as an administrator to use as a faculty meeting. So as you listen to her, think about ways that you might use this for yourself.
To me, what a quick write is, it's a short burst of writing in response to a stimulus. And the stimulus might be other pieces of writing, but it may be a video, a photo, an object. There's lots of different quick writes that I've thought about, the different kinds of sparks for different purposes. But the idea is it's almost like improv on paper. I just want the kids picking up that pencil and whatever they're thinking is there. I've got kids who, if they can't think what to write, they just write, I can't really think of what I'm writing right now. And then they'll go, oh, yes, I can. And I've actually seen some of the quick writes where the thinking starts to emerge right there on the paper. So the idea is just to get kids to initiate pieces of writing in response to lots of different things. And it's low stakes because they're not graded. The kids have the freedom to take risks and think outside the box because they're not going to be evaluated by somebody. And the freer they're thinking, the better.
So we want to invite you to think about this spark. How can we generate and sustain excitement around writing for students and their teachers? Just thinking on that for a moment. If you'd like, you can go to our resource page and type your response and see what other people are thinking. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's what we call a collaborative quick write.
Yes.
And not all of them are collaborative, but if you'd like to have your students or your teachers kind of be thinking together, you can use that one document to kind of share those ideas.
Absolutely. So when we think about this question, how to generate excitement and sustain excitement around reading and writing, writing instruction, again, we come back to coaching responsive writing teachers. We really want to coach teachers to be responsive. And there's 3 key ways that we have been thinking about that really work in doing this.
So what we're going to kind of lay out for you today is some ideas, some structures that you can put in protocols around developing the teacher themselves as a writer, and then we'll look at student work and how do you support teachers in looking at that with all the different lenses and the possibilities for instruction and where that might lead. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about, connecting with those student writers once you've developed your own writing and become identified as a writer. So we have, we're often looking at all the professionals so they can guide our work. Here are a few that really have informed our practice. One of the first ones is Christine Dawson's book with the beautiful leaves on it, The Teacher Writer. This was, talking about writing groups. We worked with that. We talked about Spark from Paula Burke. The lower right-hand corner, of course, Carl Anderson's new book.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Phenomenal.
Just put in Amazon right now.
Right now, if you don't have it.
Go put it there.
Get it.
His Writing Conferences book, as an instructional coach, has so many wonderful videos to share and kind of dissect with teachers and with your other colleagues. So that's definitely a must-have. One that's pretty much hot off the presses is Stacy Schubert's book and Lynn Dorfman, The Writing Workshop, with different models that work. But this has, I think, the Writing Workshop model, but I think any writing teacher definitely can pull instructional strategies from this book around conferencing, around looking at student work, and definitely is a must-have.
Definitely. And they also make that case for teacher writers. So a lot of what we're talking about definitely is echoed in their books. So Our goal with all of this is to develop teacher writers. To start with that, because the heart of coaching writing teachers is to guide them in being responsive to student strengths and needs. And I can't think of a better way to do that than to invite them to be writers themselves.
Oh.
So powerful, because when you write yourself, you know what that process is like. You know how hard it is. And I think back to what Paula said about the sparks and having them be low stakes. That's so important, because how many of you remember writing something and maybe even putting your heart and soul into it, and then you get it back from your teacher, taking us back to our schooling days, and that red pen. Oh, the dreaded red pen is all over it. In fact, I laugh because I remember vividly in high school, the teacher, this would have been an A paper, but too many grammatical errors, C. You know, and how devastating that is, really. So kind of, when you put yourself back in that position as a writer, and also really, really encouraging teachers to reflect on what was your writing experience like as a student. How did that work for you? How didn't it? A lot of us have said, wow, if we had been raised in a writing workshop classroom, we would be so much better at writing.
Yes. And also putting it out there publicly.
Yes.
Whether it's sharing it with a colleague, or putting it out there in a published way. Having students do that. We're asking them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I think many of us are kind of fearful of that. So
Absolutely.
We'll talk a little bit about those types of opportunities. So kind of going back to our goals, we're going to really talk about, how do we develop these responsive writing teachers? How do we coach them? How do we support them? First of all, is really identifying as a teacher writer, as a writer themselves. And then how do we support teachers when they're looking at student work, and what are the possibilities for instruction and raising those writers to the next level. And lastly, really, that conferencing time. It doesn't have to be a workshop model to be conferencing, to really talking to a writer about their piece. And, how do you connect with them? And especially if you're a teacher writer, you can talk about all those times that you were stuck, or that you looked and lifted a line from another writer, or different techniques and craft moves, and that will help in the conferencing.
Absolutely. So thinking about this question, why teacher writers? So a lot of times when I encourage teachers to write, their response is, I don't have enough, fill in the blank, time. When am I going to find time to write? I don't have time, I could barely find time to read. So this is something we have to honor and be aware of, and we face it in our own lives as well, of course, and address. And so the first thing that we do is talk about, well, why? Why should we write? Why should we make that a priority? And so a couple reasons is that teachers who write make the best writing teachers. And it's because they're in it. They know how hard it can be. I mean, I'm a believer that if you're asking students to do an assignment, you should do it yourself first. Not only do you know what it's like to move through that process, but then you can anticipate some of the difficulties and plan accordingly. It also, when you're a teacher writer, it helps you connect with and learn with students. So you're working writer to writer, and you really create this culture in your class of we're all in it together. Like writing is hard, and we're going to work through it together. So communicating that to coaches or to teachers is so critical. And also, we feel that teacher engagement feeds student engagement. If the students see you working through this, they're more likely to build that resilience in writing. And finally, it builds knowledge of teaching writing. So when you sit down to a conference, you're going to be able to anticipate what the student needs and to make that decision of what one thing does the student need right now. So the other thing I would say, obviously, is if you're asking your teachers to write, make sure you're writing as a coach as well, and sharing your writing that you're doing. Keep your writer's notebook and be ready to share that with teachers that you work with.
And I think that's so important, because as a coach, I often got asked, almost daily, if not multiple times a day, what are you reading, Shaw? What are you reading? What's hot? What's on your Goodreads list? But I never get asked what you're writing. And I think I've made a purpose also I love technology and I love to type notes on a computer, but I always use a notebook as a coach. So they can see that I have usually multiple notebooks in my purse, and one is for my personal writing and one is for my professional writing. So really seeing that and being able to share different structures, different ideas with teachers is so important.
So a couple of ideas for making this happen. So how can we develop teacher writers? One idea that Shelly mentioned earlier is begin faculty, team, grade level meetings with quick writing. So before you even get on even if it has nothing to do with the agenda, start with a quick write. So a couple of ideas that I've tried is having teachers write, what are you grateful for? What brings you joy? Maybe looking at those two lists and thinking about how are they alike, how are they different? Also, recently I closed out the year of grade level meetings with some collaborative quick writes. So one Google Doc, everybody has access to it and answers one of these sparks. One group did the best part of teaching is, fill in the blank. I know I've succeeded when, great teachers know, and when you visit our school, I hope you notice. I love that one. There are a ton of others in Paula's work, Paula's book, but I just find it was such a powerful experience to A, give teachers a chance to write, and B, help them connect with one another. It was a lot of fun to see how everyone answered that question. And as a coach, a big part of our job is to really get to know our teachers. Our sort of one of our mentors, Dr. Stephanie Afinito, once said, we ask teachers, how well do you know your students? So she asked us as coaches, how well do you know your teachers? And when you have opportunities like quick writing, that's a nice way to get to know them. Another thing we encourage and model as coaches is modeling writing in front of students. So sometimes it's very tempting when you, especially as a coach, you don't know the students and you're going in to teach a lesson, to have your tried and true piece that works every time. I always used to go with a story about how I learned to ride a bike or something I thought kids could relate to. And it was fine, but what the kids see is, oh, that's like a perfect piece of writing that's done. I can't possibly do that. So really modeling for teachers, that's important to be courageous and be a little vulnerable and sit in front of kids and just, I'm thinking of an idea, let me look through my notebook and see what you come up with on the spot. You're also showing them that writing is hard, but that you're doing the work with them. So a very quick anecdote, I did this one day with a class of some very resistant writers, fourth graders. And as I was writing this piece, which was supposed to be a memoir, I said to the class, you know what, I think this piece might want to be a poem. And so then I wrote it, started writing it as a poem. And we hadn't studied poetry. We hadn't focused on it. But what happened was I looked out at them and said, any of you think you want to try your piece as a poem? And probably about half of the hands went up. And what happened was these students who really lacked confidence in their writing all of a sudden found comfort in being able to write a poem, because it's such quick gratification in a way. I mean, it definitely needs, work with word choice and whatnot, but they all did that. That would not have happened if I hadn't been writing cold in front of the class. So.
And I think that must have been for the teacher too, a nice realization that, sometimes we have these lessons that we've planned out, but as we all know, sometimes they don't go in the direction that we have. And that's okay. With the skills that they have, it's okay to go in another direction and to step outside that genre.
Absolutely.
So other ways that we have found to help develop teacher writers is to have them partner with students and have those collaborative writing times and writing right along students. So something that we have had a lot of success with this year is something we're calling writing cafes. And writing cafes is a time, sometimes we've had them where they're specific to a genre. So it might be poetry, it might be information writing, it might be narrative writing. And, set up around the room are different stations and different ideas or sparks for the students to write about. But the most important part of this is teachers administrators, maybe parent volunteers, are invited to sit right down with the students and write alongside them. So they are not the teacher in this instant, they're just their partner in writing. They might be able to ask an idea and really have that time for the students to see their teachers or their adults as writers also. So we've had a lot of success with that. And if you are interested in learning more about the different types of cafes, you can go to LitCoach Connection. We have multiple part series there, I think 4 or 5 parts, and it'll walk you through step by step with all of the ideas. And we have that also in our links for you.
And the neat thing too about this is, when we first set this up, of course, the teachers' immediate sort of instinct is to go around and help the students with their writing. And so as a coach, I had to kind of lean in and be like, just sit down and do that. Sit with the group where you think, your squirrely students that might need a little direction. That's fine. Follow along with them. But it was just enough to get them kind of hooked and interested in writing, and they filled their writer's notebooks along with the students.
I mean, we even had one of them, our assistant superintendent, writing, and just the joy that you can see from the adults, that the students can see from the adults writing alongside them. And I think the teachers really appreciated that time,
Absolutely.
as you mentioned, because there's never enough of that. So I think that was a wonderful opportunity.
Yes.
The last one, creating teacher writing groups. So we mentioned Dr. Christine Dawson's book, Teacher Writers, and that really got Krista and I thinking about what would that look like in groups when we're all busy and we can't be in the same physical space, but how might we do that virtually? So a few years ago, we thought we'd give it a try.
Yes.
So with the guidance of Dr. Dawson's book, we set up some times to meet. We used Zoom to kind of meet in our space. But beforehand, we all wrote our writing pieces. And they weren't like a specific genre. It was just, what type of writing would you like some feedback on? It could be like, sometimes it was even an email that we were like kind of agonizing over and wanted feedback. So we took our writing pieces and we put them in a Google folder and gave each other an opportunity to read those ahead of time and kind of think about how to give feedback to each other.
Yes.
And then virtually we met and we kind of shared out, brainstormed. Very interesting the first time we tried it.
Yeah.
I said for years and years I've been giving feedback to students and have been very comfortable with it. But at first giving feedback to my friends and colleagues, it was a little unusual. I was so afraid of hurting someone's feelings, and then it got more comfortable with time.
It did, and it was so validating as a writer to have someone read your words and give you feedback on it, and then it kind of motivated me to keep working on the piece.
Yeah, and I didn't feel so alone as a writer because writing can feel very, solitary. You're by yourself as a writer. But now I had someone like Krista, to bounce ideas off with and to collaborate with. We also, for writing groups, last summer we met online through LitCoach Connection. And we put it out, and we had teachers from across the country, and one teacher joined us from Canada. And we took Ralph Fletcher's writer's notebook as our guide. We read chapters, and then we kind of shared out with a Google group, and gave each other feedback there. Thought about how can we use this when we go back in the fall, and it was just a very positive experience. And I think it went so well that this year we're trying it with Paula's book, with Spark. And probably while you're watching this, it's kind of in full swing. But if you are interested, you can always join us in midstream. But again, this time we're having, reading the research behind the Sparks, and then have an opportunity to try them out and look at all of the resources and how might we use this with teachers, how might we help them use it with their students. So lots of different opportunities around writing groups. So, I talked a little bit earlier about, having being a little fearful about the audience as an adult, but I think it's really important. Like, it's important for students to give them an audience for their writing. It's very important to do this for adults, for our teachers and administrators who are writing. So we first went to Literacy for All out in Providence, Rhode Island, and heard LitCoach lady, or Paula Burke, speak on this topic. And so she invited anyone that was there to write a piece and post it to her blog. And so we're like, okay,
we got to do it.
We got to do it. We got to do it. It's our goal. We wrote it down in our notebooks. Okay, it's there. And we each wrote a piece, and we posted it on her blog. And that was our start. And then kind of from there, we went to Teach Right, which is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. If they have a blog, they have a Facebook page, and they really encourage teacher writers. And so that was our next step. There was a wider audience, and okay, we're going to do it. So we each devised a piece. Jennifer edited it, and then submitted it. So, here we go. And so then our next step was Slice of Life.
Yes.
By
two writing teachers.
Thank you. I just had
I could tell it was like,
where to go? I knew it was there. And when we were starting up our business, we knew that we had to kind of share our writing in a big way. So once we got our website and our blog up, we decided to do the challenge for Slice of Life. So every March, if you're not familiar with it, they challenge educators to write every single day, and then they post it on Slice of Life, and then they ask you to respond to 3 other writers with some type of feedback. So we did that for the whole month.
And the great thing about that is you're writing and you're getting feedback on your writing every day, which kind of propels you to move forward. The other really cool thing, and I think this is so critical for teachers, is to see other people's blog posts, that it's not polished always. It's not beautiful. It's not, a lot of times, I remember thinking, okay, I've got this post. It really could use some more work, but you know what? I've got a deadline. I've got to get it out. It was less about a polished piece of writing and more about developing a writing habit and identifying as a writer myself. And isn't that what we want for students?
Absolutely.
A polished piece is great, but we want them to be writers because that's what they're going to transfer and carry with them. So if we can encourage teachers to connect with that and to see that, then they're more likely to value that in their writing instruction.
Absolutely. And we talk about students all the time. We want them to be lifelong readers. But not as often do we say lifelong writers, which is really what I know all of us would like to happen. And, as Krista was speaking, I thought about Pernille Ripp, and she was talking about, first draft thinking. Like, a lot of what she puts on her blog is first draft thinking. And that kind of gave me a sense of, okay, it's all right. It is all right. So Slice of Life continues throughout the year. It's not every day. Then Slice of Life becomes once a week on Tuesdays. So you can kind of visit there. What's nice also, if you wanted to support a teacher and get their students writing and get the volume of writing up, they have it so you can do it with students and the classroom piece. So you can kind of look at that and get it out there. Also, we would love to have anyone that is interested in sharing their writing after today. Please reach out to us. We'd love to post your writing on our blog if you want to try to get your own writing out there and have an audience for it, or Twitter. We're always, sharing our thoughts on Twitter and about writing and how to publish. But it's important. It may be, even sharing it out on the collaborative doc. It might be sharing it online. It might be posting it somewhere in the faculty room. But finding an audience for your adult writers is really important.
So the first piece we spoke about was developing teacher writers, so they become responsive teachers of writing. Now we're going to shift to helping teachers to look at student work with a lens of possibility. We really feel that teachers bring their own experiences to writing and looking at student work. So if they are teacher writers, they're more likely to look at that student work with a possibility and allow them to see, okay, what is the student doing well, and what can I build off of these strengths. So we talk a lot about how when you look at a piece of student work, I remember when my district was new to writing workshop, and the first thing out of everyone's mouth, oh, they didn't spell this right, and look at, there needs to be a period there and whatnot. And one of the pieces we really love is Jennifer Saraballo. Oh, she's amazing. Her writing strategies book, she has this amazing hierarchy of writing skills. And you'll see on it that grammar and mechanics is at the very bottom. And so we had those conversations with teachers when we met and looked at student work together, and we said, well, look, if you don't have content, if you don't have ideas, you can't look at mechanics. You have to have that first. And so think about that in your teaching. But that idea of how can we really look at what's positive here, what's happening here, rather than this deficit model of what's not. Again, the red pen kind of thinking, we have to get rid of it. So again, we love our heroes, Stacy Schubitz and Lynn Dorfman, and they said about this that although it's comforting to have a script or instructions on what to do each day, teachers must be able to assess student work to make informed and responsive choices about instructional decisions. Such important thinking there. So important.
It really is. So we're going to kind of walk you through a protocol that you could use with teachers in a small group. You could do this one-on-one, small group, a little bit larger group. I would think of no more than like probably 20 teachers, and then you put them into small groups. But it's called thin slicing, and this kind of came from an idea from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. And it kind of refers to that training where you discover a lot from just a small piece of data. And we're kind of going to walk you through this because we know time. It's very difficult. And when you have a large pile, especially if you're working with middle school or high school teachers, how can we really go through, kind of narrow down our focus and find out what we need to go for the next step for students. So some of the tools you might use when you're thinking about coming to the table so that your teachers can choose a lens in which to look at when they're looking at their writing. Of course, you can bring your state standards, other exemplars that you've used in the past, your district writing rubrics or other writing rubrics here we have from Teachers College. Any of those can be tools for your teacher when they're making decisions. So let's kind of walk you through this. So first of all, you're going to come, or the teachers are going to come, with a pile of their student writing. When I did this for the first time, or the first time with each group of teachers, sometimes I'll bring the writing to the table and have them work in partnerships instead of working alone. So I really highly suggest that you have them work in partnerships. So they have their 25, 30 pieces of writing that they're working with in the beginning. And you're using either the standards, using the rubrics, using an exemplar. You're going to choose some lens to look at. It may be looking at crafting a strong introduction. And you can kind of talk about what that means at that certain grade level, that genre. And then the teachers are going to quickly, 5 to 10 minutes. That's it. 30 pieces of writing, 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, right there, you're going to have them hooked. Knowing that it's so
because it always feels like such a chore to look through writing. They're like, I have no time for this, and it can feel that way. Definitely.
But when they're looking at it with just one lens, perhaps two, but really try to focus on one. They're just making 3 piles. They're just looking very quickly. Okay, low, medium, high, medium, and then at the end you have those 3 piles. Your low, medium, and high. Once they're done with that, then you're going to have them look at just what pieces are in the medium. What are your average students right now? What are their strengths and what are their areas to work on? So then they'll go through their medium pile and just quickly go through and say, are there any here that maybe should go low or maybe should go high? And then you have that. Then you want the teachers to go through the low pile, pull out one piece of student work that represents what the low students are, about where they are writing. One for medium, one for high. And then you can really use those and show the teachers on how to pick out those skills for next steps for those students. And it's been very quickly. You haven't gone through with a fine-tooth comb, but you can really get a good gist of what it means for each one of those. Also, with those piles, you can kind of use those, start building exemplars. So, if you have one from each classroom, especially in your medium pile, this is what we're hoping the students are doing right now. Here's our high, what we're working towards, and start building files, hopefully digitally. But maybe it's just, copying for the teachers and know where to go from there. So then, after you've done that and you've given teachers time to really look at those rubrics, look at those writing standards, and then together, collectively, come up with, okay, what's one thing, maybe two things that we can teach these writers, and then you can go back and have them try that. Next meeting, come together, okay, we're all working at, how to make the introductions better, put a hook in perhaps, now come back, how did that go? But also, it's also a time to really think about what is the group of writers in front of you, how many of them need this instruction?
Yeah.
Because if you have, oh my gosh, I have a lot here in my low pile, if it's like 80%, it's kind of like a rule of thumb, that still need this work, well then instead of, sending them out to work on some small group instruction, let's think of 2 or 3 mini lessons. Let's craft some mini lessons together, and then we're going to try those mini lessons in our classroom. If it's just maybe 30%, then maybe you're going to help those teachers craft some conferences. You can use the Writing Strategies book. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful to pull out some of those ideas for your teachers. And then, of course, if there's only 2 or 3 students, then we're going to say, okay, those are individual conferences or partner conferences that you can work with. But it becomes less of a daunting task when you're coming together and you're making those decisions on what your students need, and then you're crafting those mini lessons or small group lessons. And here you can see we have some teachers working together on that. They're kind of deciding on which lens that they're going to look at and making decisions for that.
Okay, and so we are at the sort of third way that we believe works for helping teachers of writing be more responsive. So far we've gone over having them be teacher writers, looking at student work with a lens of possibility and opportunity, and now we're going to talk about connecting with student writers. And so this goes perfectly into what Shelly just said about conferring and how powerful conferences are, that one-on-one time, that idea that when you sit down with a student in the conference, you want to communicate that right here, right now, you are the most important person to me. I am listening to what you have to say. And so how do we help teachers sort of own that? So again, Stacy and Lynn said that as writing teachers who write, we are able to experience the same struggles and attempts to problem solve in order to improve our skills as conferrers. So I love how they connect that being a writing teacher or a teacher writer. It's like all these terms together. A teacher writer helps you in conferencing. And so, one of the ways I think about with this is when you sit down for a conference, you are positioning yourself as less as a teacher, but more as a mentor author, because you're a writer as well. I love that idea. And it will help you gain confidence, or your teachers, to be confident in their modeling of writing techniques and modeling of taking risks and modeling experimenting with craft and mechanics. So we've organized this this idea of being a teacher writer equals being a responsive writing teacher, and kind of broken into 3 categories. So teacher as writer, teacher as writing teacher, and the impact on students. And so when you're a teacher as a writer or a teacher writer, you experience the challenges and joys of writing. So we want teachers, that's what our first part was about. We really want teachers to experience this, to do the quick writes, to try it out, to try writing cold in front of their class, see what happens. And when they do this, with their as a writing teacher hat, it fuels their energy to do the hard work of writing workshop, and it will fuel the students' energy to do the hard work of writing workshop. It helps you connect to your students, writer to writer, author to author. Also, when you are a teacher as a writer, you're in it, get it.
Yes.
And a move for this is to write in front of your students, which will then increase their motivation to write. Because they say, we're all in this together. It's hard, but we're all in this together. And boy, it's hard work to write, but it's so wonderful to have written. I think Mem Fox said that. Model that for them. And then finally, it builds teacher knowledge of writing and not just teaching writing. So there's a difference there, I think. So I'm now knowledgeable as a writer. It's more than just looking at, say, I have a manual or some kind of a guide with lessons. It's more than that, because now I've developed a writerly eye. And it will inform teachers' decisions. When we sit down for a conference, as we talked about earlier, just like when you sit down with a piece of student work, you'll see, well, this writer needs 7 different things. Oh. And so the biggest conversation to have with teachers is you are teaching the writer, not the writing. Yes. Because I always say, well, what good does it do if they have this beautiful piece of writing, but then they go to their next piece and they have no transferable skills? They don't, it's constant. Well, what's the purpose of that? So asking teachers those tough questions and having those tough discussions is important. So what we say is, what does this writer need the most right now? And then you can keep in your conferring notes a running list of other things and model that for teachers. I always go in with my own conferring notes. And I model that for them. Now I'm making notes on this, this, and this. I see this, but today this is what I'm going to teach. And all of this really does grow student writers. So how do we coach teachers to connect with writers? So these are some of the coaching moves that we'll speak about. The first one is to watch one of the master, the master confer. I remember seeing Carl Anderson almost 20 years ago at Teachers College, and I was coached back
so
when he wrote "How's It Going?" Remember that one?
Oh my gosh!
It's an older book now, but it's so good. It's a great one. And now we were just so overjoyed that he came out with the Writing Conferences book. And as Shelly mentioned earlier, it is filled with amazing videos of him conferring with students as young as kindergarten and as old as 8th grade. Yes. So it's a great thing to watch with your teachers at a team level meeting or a planning meeting. We always recommend too that when you're watching videos to help the focus be on the work, you might ask half of the teachers to focus on the teacher moves and half the student moves in the conference. Or you may say, okay, when you watch this, I want you to look for a lens of perhaps how is the teacher, in this case Carl, connecting with the student. How does he communicate that idea that what you are saying to me is so important right now? Notice how it's not about just reading the piece. A lot of times, like another one of our mentors, Leah Mermelstein, tells the story about how one time she was conferring with a kid and she realized what he wanted to say was not on the page at all. It was all here. So sometimes it's just listening to the students and their plans. So watching those conferences, if you don't have Carl's book and others, which you should get it if you don't, but if in other sources, you can go to Vimeo to find videos. Teachers College has a Vimeo page, and then YouTube. And we actually have a YouTube channel now.
Yes.
And have included some videos of us conferring with students. So they're by no means masterful, but go ahead and take a look. It'll still give you something to talk about. In fact, sometimes I think those are better because when teachers see things that are too polished, you get the refrain of,
where's the rest of the students?
Yeah, this is what work with my kids. Yeah.
So if you have videos, and that's kind of one thing that we'll talk about. And I know there's another presenter over the next 4 days, it'll be talking about videotaping lessons.
Yes.
That's what's so key. If you are able to videotape lessons of you modeling lessons, of lab site types of opportunities, and then share those out at a later time with your teachers. Yes, these are our teachers in our district. These are our students, and it really is very valuable.
So while videos are great and we love them, we also love lab sites, because that's where labs, if you're not familiar with the model, it's where you and a group of teachers typically, doesn't have to be a large group, but you go into a classroom and either you teach the lesson or you co-teach the lesson with the teachers, or maybe you're observing another teacher teach the lesson. And then you have a chance basically for the teachers to see a lesson live. We talk also about when you're doing lab sites, again, kind of like with videos, to set up some clear lenses. Like when we go into this lab site, this is what we're looking for. Maybe we're going to really notice the charts in the room and how the teacher's using the charts. Maybe we're going to really look at conferring. That's our study. And be clear that when the teacher or whoever is modeling is doing the conference, that everybody comes around and hovers and listens in and is ready to talk about it afterwards. Because the temptation is going to be, oh, I'm just going to go over here and help this kid. Right. No, we're all learning together. We kind of travel as a pack in a way. It's a good way to think about it, and do this together. So lab sites are really powerful because then they're in it and they can see things that maybe, less staged as a video would be. So we love lab sites as well.
And I think too, what you can also do, and I've tried in the past, is when teachers are going in for a lab site, maybe we're all looking with the same lens, or each teacher, if there's like 2, 3, 4 teachers, each one of them could have a different lens. And you can also include them in part of it. They may be teaching part of the lesson, each one of them. You might have someone come in and they're going to do the piece of conferring, someone's going to do the mini lesson, someone else is going to do the share, so they might be more involved, or they might be just going in and looking at those different pieces and then sharing out, having a time to debrief after.
Yes, and conferring, and we're going to talk a little bit about the techniques of whispering and voiceover and conferring together. So in this slide, one of the things we've thought a lot about are coaching moves within the gradual release of responsibility framework. So we know this framework as teachers, right? The I do, we do, you do. We think a lot about how to apply this to coaching teachers.
Yes.
And so the I do might be where you're modeling a lesson as a coach, and you might use a technique called voiceover, where you're teaching the lesson and you may stop and say to the teacher, do you notice how I just did this? To make your kind of the learning clear at that moment.
Yes.
So the we do is where you teach together, that co-teaching model, which is probably my favorite. I love co-teaching. So a nice way to co-teach, if you're using a writing workshop and mini lesson or conferring framework, is to divvy up the parts. So we have the different parts of a mini lesson. You may be familiar with this, the architecture of mini lessons and conferences. With a mini lesson, the connection, the teach, the active engagement, and the link. So I'll sit with teachers, sometimes say, okay, which parts would you like to do? Maybe I start with the connection, they do the teach. We kind of do maybe I'm leading the active engagement, but during it, we have a clear sort of understanding that we're both listening in to what students say. We're both kind of that part of it, of listening in, and then we both share out what we heard. And then the link. And the same with the parts of a conference, research, decide, complement, teach. I may model the whole thing if I'm in the I do phase, or if I'm in the we do phase, maybe I do the research. I'll stop the conference, tell the student, just carry on, keep writing, turn to the group of teachers or the single teacher and say, okay, what are you noticing? This is what I'm noticing. And decide together what one thing should we teach the student. Right. And sometimes I'll continue through. And then other times I'll step out of the seat next to the student and the teacher will step in and take over. And then we talk about how it went afterwards. So when you're using that we do model, you might use a technique called copycat.
Yeah, so that's that is where you have, multiple teachers in the room. So if you are, if you've talked ahead of time about a certain type of conference that you might want to do, you can go in, talk about it, and then everyone is watching you do that with a student. And then they're going to go right away. They're going to be close to you so you can listen into multiple teachers, and they're going to try that with another student. And probably, use the exact same language
Yeah.
Until they get more comfortable. And then you're going to go to the next phase of the conference, and then they're going to copycat with their student. So it really, gets them comfortable going through the whole process but you're right there to model it for them, and then they're going to try that.
And actually, that's a perfect bridge from we do to you do.
Absolutely.
Really, because
Absolutely.
then they're doing the copycat, and then in the you do, they can eventually do it themselves on their own. So with a you do, that's when the teacher's leading it, and maybe you're going to do things like whisper in. So kind of setting that up ahead of time. It's going to be awkward if you're all of a sudden, whispering to a teacher.
Now try this.
Yeah, I mean,
say this.
Maybe lesson's too long. Cut it off. These things happen. So, but you're kind of guiding them in that way. And again, voiceover can be used as well.
I love whisper in because you're teaching them also how to be a coach with their students.
Yes.
So when you have partnerships working, you can teach them how to whisper into one of the partners and say this, try this, ask this. And they're still looking at their partner. You're kind of whispering in back here, the partner is over here. And that way they get a sense of how they can use it also with students.
Okay. So planning for next steps. So we've just spent, this time together. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching. And we want to invite you to do another collaborative quick write. And then you can just click on the link on our resource page to contribute if you wish. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're thinking. Maybe you finish the phrase, one thing I will try is, or the spark, this year I hope, and name what you hope for your coaching this year. Mm-hmm. This has gotten us to start thinking about what we hope for our coaching next year. We're still in school right now. As we're filming this, I'm expecting kids to start coming down the hallway.
You might start hearing buzzers and
buzzers, the announcements.
Yes, going off.
So I haven't really thought too much about next year yet, but I guess it's time to start, right?
Yeah. I know that I've used a little bit a new device we've had called the Swivel.
Yes.
Where it's kind of like my lanyard, my school lanyard. And you just put that on, and then you have an iPad or an iPhone hooked up to a tripod, and it just follows you around, and it makes it much easier for that videotaping. Because sometimes I don't videotape as often because I'm looking for someone else to help me out to videotape, and I don't want the teacher missing out or something like that. So I think that's going to be one of my goals, so that I can use that to support teachers and kind of look at that, at least one of them for next year.
Absolutely. I'm hoping to do a lot more work in writing workshop, but also in reading workshop as well, in reading conferences. We have Jennifer Saraballo's other book. And I'm actually leading a book study. We didn't talk about book studies yet. This summer, where we will get together, read the book, contribute virtually our thinking, and then that will kind of sort of feed our work together, drive our work together in the fall. But real quick, we do want to mention that book study is a great way to engage teachers and really develop that common language. So any of the texts we mentioned today would be amazing choices, especially, the writing workshop, Spark, or Carl's piece. They're all wonderful. So,
okay. So we'd love to hear from you. Questions, you can put questions down below, but as your school year starts or things you're thinking of more, if you're reading or listening to this 2 years from now, in the archive somewhere, please reach out to us on Twitter. If you happen to be at any of these conferences,
say hi. We'd love to meet you in person.
Yeah. We're so excited to be presenting again on this work at NCTE down in Baltimore. And we're going to be looking at a couple others on visual thinking strategies when we're at the New York State Reading Conference or the New York State English Council and Literacy for All this year. So if you're at any of those, we'd love to hear from you, connect with you, because, yes, it is a solitary
It is.
endeavor.
We need each other. We really do. And please subscribe to our mailing list so we can keep in touch that way as well. And feel free to email us with any questions, thoughts. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you try, what works, and we're happy to help problem solve in any way we can.
Yeah, we can't wait to learn from all the other amazing folks that are part of this summit. Thank you so much to Nicole Turner for making this happen for all of us and sharing in this learning.
Thank you.